And I've had the really the honor, the privilege of coordinating this for a few years, this candidates forum. Excuse my back, please. I want to thank you all for coming out. We only have one contested race, but there are a lot of important issues. And hopefully you'll be voters as well as participants tonight. Encourage your neighbors to vote. If you know of anybody who needs a request an absentee ballot, that's available in the hallway. The form for absentee ballot is available in the hallway. There's also forms available for registering to vote. If you have children who haven't yet registered, grown-up kids, almost grown-up, I guess, or neighbors or anybody you question, you can take that form and encourage them to please register, and they can bring it to Diana in the town clerk's office. There's some other information. I haven't looked at it, but there is other information in the hallway on the table. If you want to check that out on your way out. I'm not going to go into detail about the format, but as many of you have already experienced, the questions come from you all. And if you're coming in late and you have a question to ask, there's index cards up here and pens. Also, you can generate questions during the forum. Just raise the card up, raise your hand up with the card when you've completed your question, and some of us will be on the lookout for those cards. So you don't have to think of all your questions right now. Please address the question. If you have a specific person whom you wish to answer your question, please be sure to specify and write that person's name on the card. At the conclusion of the more formal question and answer part, the candidates will be available to meet, to mingle, meet and greet you. I don't know, I think many of them have brought contact information, and so we encourage you to stay after it looks like the forum is over. And after we mingle and meet and greet, the town manager has asked for a very few minutes to just share some factual information about the other ballot item that is not a candidate, but is on our ballot for this coming March 2018. So I'd like to introduce some folks to you. First, I want to say that Joan Lennis was going to be here, but is not here because tonight is the last school board meeting that she would be attending as a school board representative after 25 years. And I really encouraged her to be there for the whole meeting. Yes, she deserves, I'll say thank you on her behalf, and she deserves that applause for that and many other civic contributions that she's made. She would have been speaking on behalf of the Shelburne Democrats, but I'm going to do that because I represent them as well. And I also want to say that Jessica Brumstead was planning to be here as one of our town representatives. But today there was a decision by the House, I believe it was a House Democrats caucus. I'm not positive I have that right. I don't know who all is involved, to gather tonight and to discuss some forward movement, some action that could be taken during this session in Vermont regarding gun control, gun sense, especially meaningful, unfortunately, in light of the recent tragedies. So we have 4 sponsors. As I said, I'm wearing a couple of hats here. This is a nonpartisan event where all residents, we all have the town's interests in mind, as do all the candidates, but the sponsors are representing the different political parties in our state, or some of them, there's more than the few I'm going to mention, as well as the sponsor from the Shelburne News. So on behalf of the town Democrats, I want to say welcome. We're happy to spearhead this event as we have for the last few years. We want to say we have monthly meetings that are open to the public, and we also are going to be sponsoring a few public forums, panel discussions. The first is March 20th. I don't know if there's an information sheet on the table out there. The theme is defending democracy, and the information about the March 20th will appear soon in the Shelburne News Front Porch Forum. So that's it for the town Democrats. I want to introduce Mike Donahue, who is with us from the town Republican Committee.
Good evening. My name is Mike Donahue. I'm the chair of the Shelburne Republican Committee and the Chittenden County Republican Party. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight. I wanted to thank Nancy for spearheading this and bringing this together. This is my first time participating in this event as chair, and I think this is great. And I want to thank all the candidates and the moderator. Our politics is very contentious at the moment and very divided, and I think we can feel good about a gathering like this. And all of you coming out tonight, everyone's real busy to talk with our candidates and listen to them. And I just want to thank everybody for making time for this. We do also meet regularly, not quite monthly, but we're building, we're trying. We're having our next meeting, in fact, next week at the Dutch Mill at 7:30 on the 27th from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. So any Republicans, friends of Republicans, or people who'd like to meet Republicans are welcome to come for a warm breakfast and conversation about the legislative session and just general interests of the community. So thank you again.
Thanks, Mike. And Linda Watts is here representing the town committee for progressives. And I'll come to you, Linda.
Thank you. Well, I guess really hadn't expected to say anything, but just on behalf of the Progressive Party, I'm really glad to be able to help to co-sponsor and to be part of a town that has so many perspectives and points of view and some rational democratic ways of, small d, democratic ways of talking about them and resolving them. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Mike, the other Mike Donahue, is here from the Shelburne News. We have two Mike Donahues, and
I'm the original. My name is Mike Donahue, as you heard, and I'm one of the writers for the Shelburne News. And Shelburne News is proud through the years to cover important issues in the town and for the residents. And it's been my pleasure to actually know all the owners through the years as I toiled down the road at the Burlington Free Press. And now in retirement, I'm helping out with the Shelburne News, which was purchased last May, as many of you know, by the Stowe Reporter Group, which owns and operates like 3 papers in Waterbury, Stowe area. They bought Shelburne and the Citizen, which covers Charlotte and Heinsberg. And we appreciate the positive welcome. On behalf of the newspaper owners, along with publisher Greg Popa, editor Lisa Scalodi, and all the other staff and worker bees, want to welcome you and thank you all for coming, and good luck to the candidates here. And read the Shelburne News to be informed on where they stand, and good luck.
thank you. Thanks, Mike, the original. And I'd like to also introduce the timekeeper. This is Brian Flynn. And full disclosure, this is my better half. Recruited, didn't really get to volunteer. And also, I want to introduce, and he'll be speaking at much greater length, I want to introduce David Webster. David is the moderator this evening. He is filling in for Tom Little, who is successfully and recovering well from a recent surgery, but not quite up to a public appearance yet. But he'll be with you all of us, at the town meeting. So thank you very much, David, for this fun job that you're going to do. We appreciate that. Now we'd like to introduce each of the candidates, and each candidate has up to 2 minutes to give your opening statement, share anything you want to share, so forth. And do you want to start? Sure. Okay. You have your own mic.
Hi, I'm Diana Vachon. I'm the current town clerk, and I stand. Sure. I am on the ballot for a 3-year term, and I'm very excited to be. Thank you all for coming and taking time out of your busy schedules. It's really nice to see you all here. And thank you, Nancy and David and VCAM and all of the candidates. Thank you. So, and Darwin Norris and our maintenance staff set up the room tonight. It was really great. And I just want to acknowledge my staff, Sue Maraska and Lisa Mann, the assistant town clerks, their dedication to Shelburne and their knowledge, and they work really hard. So next time you walk by, please thank them. Let's see. So I've been very honored to be here for the last year and a half. It's really wonderful. I've learned a lot. I've met so many people. I work really hard to be neutral on all the issues, to be fair and equal to everyone, to treat everyone with kindness and respect, and be as transparent as we can be in the clerk's office. I want to thank all the election officials who volunteer or come and work at the elections, and the BCA is a great group of people, and to really come together and work as a team to put these elections on for the town. It's really important, and they do a great job. And if you want to be an election official, my door is open. Come see me anytime. So let's see, a couple of things that we've been doing. Oh, our dog and cat licensing is underway. If you have a pet, please register by April 1st. It's really important to have your pet vaccinated for rabies. It's still in the state. I think last year we had one skunk that was rabid. And in the last few years, we've had one dog, and for every one dog, there's about 5 cats that get rabies. So it's important to vaccinate both. Okay, and then, so the most fun I've had with being town clerk is the community service project with the Shelburne Community School, where the 8th graders come over once a week for an hour and help me out, and they get to do community service and a civics lesson, and it's really great. Thank you.
Barbra Marden. Thank you, Nancy. I'm Barbra Marden. I'm a Shelburne resident. I've been a resident since 2004. I'm here with my family, right in the audience. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I will tell you briefly about myself. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, full-time student. And the reasons why I feel I'm a valuable candidate and why I come before you today. So I was born in Uganda, had an exposure to the Ugandan educational system, which is British-based, moved to Italy, had a chance to take my kids into Italy school, spent a year there. So they had an exposure of the educational system in Italy. When I moved here in the US, I put myself through college, undergrad in Massachusetts, and now I'm completing my MPA, which is a Master's in Public Administration at UVM. So I feel I'm very a big advocate of public schools. I'm very engaged with my community, also with the school. I've been helping out with some PTO activities. I did, since my kids were little, from K to 4th grade, I was helping teaching the hands-on nature program, which I think they still have, but we don't have the chance anymore now that they're in the middle school. I do mentor at the Shelburne Community School, and one of the things that I feel that I would bring to the board, I do embrace diversity, which we feel this is one major thing missing, and actually in our community, Shelburne. So I feel like I'll bring a unique perspective to the board, and I would like to be a representative of this community. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Storey. I'm running for a 2-year term on the select board. I've been serving a 2-year term, so I am running for re-election. I want to thank you for coming. I want to express gratitude to the sponsors for organizing and holding this. Congratulations to my fellow candidates for being willing to step up to the plate. And I will give you 2 brief reasons why I'm running. First, because I believe Shelburne is due a fully functioning collegial select board. And I believe I'm going to be able to contribute significantly to accomplishing that. Second, there are major challenges that face the town. I believe through my experience and manner that I'm going to be able to assist significantly in accomplishing, in meeting those challenges. And finally, this is my way of giving back to a community who from the very beginning welcomed me as one of its own. Thank you.
Mary? Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Kehoe, and I'm running for the open 3-year seat on the Select Board. Why I'm running actually begins with a story, so I hope you'll indulge me a little bit. I lived in Burlington since 1985, so 20 plus years, and moved to Shelburne with a little apprehension because I was so embedded in the Burlington community. So moving to a new community, I was not sure what to expect. And I was so heartened, and it was so warming to be welcomed to Shelburne by the wonderful people who live here, both in my neighborhood and in town. It just made me feel like this was a place I made the right choice to move to. And it wasn't long after beginning my residency here in Shelburne, and that was by the way, in July of 2013, that I was asked to throw my hat in the ring for the DRB. And I was lucky enough to be selected along with Jerry Storey, by the way. And I started to serve on the DRB, and that experience was the same as my initial experience moving here. It was warm and welcoming, and people worked together respectfully and collegially. And it made me very happy to be part of that little piece of town governance. I want to bring that same perspective to the Select Board, a perspective where people know and respect each other and work together to solve the important problems that are facing us. And I think if we work together as a community, there's no problem we can't solve. I'm really positive about that. I'm aware that there are significant issues that are confronting the Select Board, but I feel that if we all work together and study all problems from every perspective, and working with you and keeping lines of communications open with you, we can accomplish that goal. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Jaime Heins. Thank you for coming on this dreary Tuesday evening. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you to David Webster as well for moderating. A little bit about me. We've lived in Shelburne for 6 years now. My wife is a former Pearson trustee. We have 2 children at Shelburne Community School. Professionally, I'm attorney at Kerry Green Mountain, former general counsel to Burton Snowboards. I serve on the boards of the Greater Burlington YMCA. I serve on the board of the Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation. And I am a former planning commissioner as well for 5 years, 2 years of which I was the chair of that commission. I currently serve on the Select Board. I was appointed in November of 2017 to serve the remaining term of John Kerr's seat. I'm running for the 1-year term. And I'm running for 2 main reasons. I am a big believer in public service, and this is my way of giving back to the town. And secondly, I feel like we have more to accomplish. I've only had 3 months on the board. We have a lot of work to do, some initiatives that are underway, and I believe that I can help progress and accomplish many of those initiatives. Look forward to talking more about the issues, and thank you again, and thanks for your support.
Good evening. My name's Chris Boyd. Thank you for everybody for coming. Thank you for everyone who sponsored this event. Been in town for 34 years. Native Vermonter. Been in the area for most of my life. Raised in Vergennes, but started off in Burlington. But Shelburne's a very unique, very tight-knit community. I love being here. And it's part of why I want to be back, or come back to the board to finish out that 1-year seat of John Kerr's. there is a lot of work that needs to be done by the board. There's no doubt about it. And I would like to bring 30, well, I've been working my life in public service. So with the town, through the highway department, on the fire department, on the select board for a 3-year term before. So have a lot of experience with the town and would like to bring that to this seat and be a voice for the people. So with that, would appreciate your vote, but most of all, if there's one thing that I would say out of this whole thing has bothered me the most, it's looking at the past March ballot, or the election, and seeing how few actually got out and voted. And maybe if nothing else, with the two of us going after each other, we can get more people to vote this year. So
drew the short
please,
straw,
let's
Chris.
get everybody out and vote.
Thank you, Chris. I want to remind you, there are also some other candidates in the ballot who aren't here this evening. They are also uncontested seats. Tom Little will once again be on the ballot for our town moderator, and he'll be performing in that role at our town meeting coming up pretty soon. Bob Lake is on the ballot for constable, and Peter Gaddu is on the ballot, I believe, for water commissioner. But they weren't able to join us tonight. I would really ask all of you to please turn off your phones out of respect for each other and for the candidates who have worked to prepare for this evening. You may generate questions throughout. There should be cards. If you want a card, an index card and a pen, raise your hand and I'll come running. And when your question is, you finish writing your question, just hold it up in the air and I'll bring it up and we'll see if it's been covered or if there's time to include it. Not all questions will be included. At this point, David Webster will explain in more detail the format briefly, and then we'll get rolling. Thank you, everybody.
The candidates will each, they've already had their 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and as Nancy's explained, all questions will be written on 3x5 cards. There will be no questions from the floor. Questions will be addressed, if appropriate, to all candidates. However, additional time may be allowed for the candidates who are running in a contested race. Please specify in your question whether it is to be asked of all candidates or specifically for one or more of the individual candidates. And we have roughly 1 hour for this, so not all questions which have been submitted will be used. And we've been in the process of combining questions that are similar in nature. We ask that the candidates' responses are concise and to the point and no more than 2 minutes in length. The responses are to be addressed to the audience and not to the other candidates. And the candidate should expect to be advised if the response exceeds the allotted time or veers off the topic. And once the question has been answered by a candidate, there will be no rebuttal time for other candidates. And if time permits, the candidates may be asked to make short closing statements, not more than 1 minute in length. And the candidates have agreed to stay after the forum to speak with the audience members informally. Also, Town Manager Joe Colangelo will have an opportunity to speak on the regional dispatch following the post-forum discussion period. And we urge you to stay and hear his brief statement if you're interested. So, with that, I think we'll proceed. And there are some questions that will be appropriate for all of you, but most, I would say, are really directed towards the select board. So we'll start with one that is really something for everyone. So briefly explain your 3 top priorities for the school board, for the town clerk's office, for the select board, and let's start with you, Diana.
Hi, okay, top three priorities?
Yes.
Top 3 priorities, I think, for the clerk's office is always to remain neutral, but to keep technology on the cutting edge of technology, to keep the land records in order for everyone. I really like to do the civic lessons with the kids and really try and get them involved in the town and learning about government. Whatever you need, please vote for me. Thank you.
My 3 priorities are going to be, number 1, diversity awareness. Number 2, I would like to have more open time for our children in the schools. And I can talk to you all after, if I need to expand on that. And then the other thing I think that is important is making sure that we have programs that channel from the school out into the community. Like if we have kids that are of need, how do we make sure that as they leave the school, they are channeling into different programs and we know that somebody's taking care of them? Thank you.
My first priority would be to improve the tone and conduct of board meetings. My second priority would be to establish a budget review process which features very significant and extensive community input much earlier this year, given the fact that in addition to a significant tax increase this year, we face an even greater one at this moment next year. I think it's critically important this spring and early summer that we begin serious discussions amongst ourselves as to levels of service, other ways of generating revenue, and such. Third, I believe there's opportunity, and given the skills that you see reflected here, among which are the fact that all of these candidates have board experience in Shelburne. That's an unusual resource for us on the select board, and I think there's opportunity possibly to decentralize decision-making on the select board by better utilizing the skills that are present, by potentially assigning certain areas and interests to those who have the greater expertise and experience, and by definitely establishing a collegial, collaborative relationship among all members.
Thank you. My 3 priorities are to open up lines of communication between the select board and the public. I have some specific ideas for doing that. I was a city councilor in Burlington for a while, and one thing I found very effective and useful is to post on Front Porch Forum what the agenda items are that are coming up, and then what was decided at a meeting so that people can easily see in their inbox what's happening. I know that the town manager has his weekly report, but it comes to you as a document you have to open, and it's not very concise. It's thorough, but I think something concise, and I think people should get that both before and after a meeting. So I will pledge to do that if elected. I also think it would be appropriate for there to be a regular column in the Shelburne News, which I haven't seen, for one or all of the members on a serial basis to communicate through that newspaper, just like Representatives Brumstead and Webb do, and we also get a regular one from the President Pro Tem of the Senate. We should have that for the Select Board as well. My second priority is to keep Shelburne vibrant without reaching deeper into your pockets for real estate taxes. That's going to be a hard task. We have to increase, in my opinion, our tax base and keep our budget very smart. And my third priority is actually a subset of that, which I'm extremely excited about. I want to see Shelburne become carbon neutral. Right now, the town of Shelburne, are you ready for this, spends $250,000, or at least it did at FY17, $250,000 to GMP. We should be solar. There's no reason why we can't accomplish that goal and reduce that bill significantly, which would take some pressure off of all of us. Thank you.
Top 3 priorities. For me, the first would be really restoring the tone of civic discourse with the community. By that, I mean both within the board and with the public. I think there are 2 sitting select board members here, and they can attest to we've made progress on that front. It may not always be the most visible to everybody in the room, but trust me that things are improving. I would share that as the chair of the Planning Commission, that was a group that came from different ideologies, and we had tough policy issues to navigate. And it's 7 members, so you have more people bring different opinions to the table. And we always found a way to, for the most part, find common ground on issues. It was a very high-functioning board, and I believe that I can add that value to this board as well and continue that track record. Secondly, stormwater. That's a big one for us. I know everybody's been following that. We're making great headway on this. This is an issue I've been in the weeds on for many years as a planning commissioner. We initiated the first stormwater summit in town. We brought stakeholders together from various parts of the town as well as the region, including Marty Illick. And it's a big issue for us. It's a big fiscal issue. It's a challenge that we're making great headway on. We have a stormwater advisory committee that's made up of really some amazing people who are taking the laboring oar on this issue. And what we need to do is get the stormwater utility up and running, and a big piece of that will be developing policies and the ordinance of that. So I believe I can add the tactical work to help progress that. Last issue I would say is economic development. We really need to address the grand list. It's struggling 0.5% last year. We need to really think creatively about how to address this. We have some really smart people in town. Local business is critical to revitalize, and the corridor itself on Route 7 is an area where the form-based code will come into play soon, and we can talk more about that later. Thank you.
Three things. Seems simple, right? I keep trying to run them over in my mind to make sure I don't forget something. So the first one would be to listen. There are a lot of people in town that have a lot of great ideas about this community, and they all are for one thing, so that we all maintain a great community. So listening to everyone, I think, is very important. It also may help in the other side of things, what we were talking about with how high our lack of voting is, the number of people who don't show up. Maybe they feel they don't have been listened to. So that would be the first part, listening to people. Second would be fiscal responsibility. I would do everything to make sure that the town stays affordable for everyone. Very key point. There's one thing with this town, it has a lot of different salary ranges as far as residents who live here, and we need to be mindful of all of that. The third part that goes along with it, to be a problem solver. We've got a lot of problems coming up. I think all of us have said the same thing. We've got problems now and more to come. But we need to be able to look at that creatively and together so we can come up with good, solid resolutions that we don't have to keep revisiting. Fix it once and be done with it. So, thank you.
And I guess we'll start this time with you, Chris, to get you back on your feet. But this question will be for everyone, which is basically how do your background, education, and experience suit you for the office? And if you could address as well what your leadership style would be to help bring the people together. And if you have a concrete example, that would be great. So.
All right. Broad range there. So I worked for many years for Paul Goodrich in town with the town highway department. Also worked for about 2.5 years with Kevin Wooster at the wastewater treatment plant. It wasn't just a job. If there's one thing with a small community like this, when you're working for the community, you not just learn your job, you learn the political infrastructure, if you will, how the town really works. There's a different perspective from the inside than there is from not being there. I'm not saying it makes me a better person. Just gives a different perspective, a different outlook on things. The other side of it is, for 20 years I've been working for the state of Vermont. To go from municipal government to state government really opens your eyes up to, you learn how local government works when you're working for local government, and to step into state government and realize how much broader that base is as far as span and control. There's so much more that can be done within the town as far as how the townspeople can interact with its board, with its inner functions, and get more done. So, kind of lost my thought there for a second. I believe that helps me with the problems we've got coming up. So I'll pass it on to Jamie.
Okay. So the questions about background, experience, and leadership style. Background, I talked a little bit. I won't repeat what I said. I'm an attorney by training. I believe it's a good background for the type of analytical as well as strategic work that's involved with the select board. In my day-to-day job, I'm responsible for both dispute resolution on a litigation side, as well as non-litigation disputes, as well as contractual matters. So putting deals together, getting people together. So that background, I believe, is helpful. Served on the Planning Commission for several years. We had a very high-functioning board. Beyond that, my leadership style, I'd talk a little bit about. You know, I like to say that I'm someone who leads from the middle. I'm not a guy who's about his ego, and I don't need the spotlight. I really enjoy putting people together, and one good example of that from my Planning Commission days is we really worked hard to work jointly with other boards and commissions, and we developed a great rapport with the Natural Resources Committee. Really made some great progress on stormwater and some other key issues in town. And that was just a nice example of really reaching out, communicating with other stakeholders in town. I have strong relationships with town staff from my years of service on the Planning Commission, as well as currently on the Select Board. So I believe those attributes will really help serve me well if I were elected going forward. Thank you.
Like Jamie, I too am an attorney. I'm also a trained mediator, having done a course at Harvard for that, and also here in Vermont. I serve on the Federal Early Neutral Evaluation Panel, which calls upon me regularly to help parties evaluate and resolve their disputes. This might sound funny, but I'm also a divorce attorney, and I think that allows me to have the skills to help resolve disputes. It's what I do for a living every day. And it's, most people think when you say you're an attorney, a trial attorney or a divorce attorney, they think that you know, you're going to court on your shield and coming back either on it or with it. But most of what we do, 90% of it, is resolving heated disputes. And to do that, especially in the context of what I do, it's to look at a problem from all different angles, because what I do is problem solving. It's not the typical kind of lawsuit where you're trying it in front of a jury and asking them to return a money verdict for a wrong done. We're trying to really solve a problem. So I bring 30 years of problem solving to the Select Board. I also had the opportunity to serve as a Burlington City Councilor, and not just at any point in time during the history of Burlington, but at the Burlington Telecom point in time. A very controversial period of time where we had to do some very difficult problem solving. So I think that that's a skill that I can bring to the board and work collegially with my colleagues on the board if elected. And I can't stop before I give a plug to the DRB, the Development Review Board, where like Jamie's commission, we actually like to joke a little bit about whose board is more vibrant, and I think we do that in a collegial way. But we do some problem solving there, and we've been able to do that pretty well, I think, very well for the last 4 years, and I would like to bring that to the Select Board. Thanks.
I have 20 years' experience in municipal government. The greater part of that as a town manager. I began as a town manager in a community of 752 individuals, most of which came to every meeting and all of which had some problem with town managers. It has stood me well. Otherwise, I have an unfair advantage because at my age, I have a lot of experiences that you can apply. A lot of learning, a lot of wisdom, a lot of reducing your personal involvement and thinking of others, a lot of looking around you and mobilizing and getting together and teaming, and that may be the greatest advantage I have of all. It took the shape of training deck crews on vessels in the military, of establishing policy task forces in Washington at top level agency, at top agency levels, of coaching, of teaching, both in the classroom and of teaching teachers, and it never really leaves you. I think you're disposed to it. I'm not sure you can be instructed in how to do it. I think you bring it with you every day, and I think it's mostly here, and I'm pleased and honored to be able to offer that kind of experience to Shelburne.
So my skills, I forgot to mention that I'm a full-time employee. I work at a software company. I'm a software technician. I've been there for 14 years. One of my roles has been I've managed a team of about 50 that's onshore and offshore in India. We have a team in India. During that, part of my job has been to lead calls. We work with medical schools. We work with hospitals. So day to day, you're trying to make sure that the issues are resolved for our clients, pulling in different resources. So there is a lot of collaborative and being able to listen. I take different roles. On top of that, outside of my day-to-day job, I sit on the Social Services Committee in Shelburne, where I've been there now almost 8 months or so. I also am on membership chair of our congregation, so which means making sure that we are adding members to our congregation in order to survive. As far as my educational background, I pretty much talked about where I came from and having that exposure to different educational systems. And I think that prepares me for this role. Thank you.
Let's see. So I have a bachelor's degree in business. I'm also a licensed acupuncturist. I volunteer for different boards, the Laura Mann Center for Integrative Health and the Vermont Acupuncture Association, and I'm a Dragon Heart supporter. So my heart's in the right place. It helps me with my people skills. It helps me to be able to balance the accounts. It helps me. The leadership role is more of a collaborative team effort. Both my staff have been here a lot longer than I have and know the vault a lot better than I do. So I really look to them for their knowledge and their guidance and how can we make this better, and value their opinion. And we're working together. So it's really a great experience. Thank you.
The next question I'm trying to combine here, it's basically in light of the projected tax increase we're facing, and I think this is really more for the select board members. Twofold, what ideas do you have in terms of dealing with it, and how do you make the process, whether it's the budgeting process, but how do you make the whole process in dealing with it more transparent for the public? Why don't we start with you, Jerry?
I would say we are at this point answering questions, and as we encourage people to vote, because there are concerns about this year now. So this process is not a start and finish at some future date. This is an ongoing matter. I think the concern that some of us are expressing is that the major elements that are driving an increase this year are also present next year, and in some cases they're even stronger. In effect, we're going to begin budgeting next year with a projected tax increase that resembles the one that is in the budget that you will vote on this year. So you can understand the concern. There are three ways of looking at it. There are very limited sources of revenue. It's taxation. It depends on the grand list, which has been noted has been flat for some time. And it may depend upon the innovation of other revenue sources in the form potentially of a local option tax, for instance. It may very well depend upon our success and ability in attracting investment in Shelburne, which increases the size of the grand list. But ultimately and finally, it has to involve expenditure. And in our case, expenditure is a direct expression of levels of service. This is a full-service community, and I think we need to begin talking this spring and summer seriously about how sustainable those levels of service are, and if so, what tax efficiencies we can realize in offering them.
Thank you. There's no question we're going to get hard hit this year, and Jerry's right. The cost, the three drivers of the tax increase this year are the Quint fire truck that we bought, the town development that was authorized in a somewhat anemic vote, and then also the police contract. Some things that we can do, obviously, is to increase our tax base. We have to do that in a smart way. As far as I know, the two things that are positive as far as that goes are Wake Robin coming online with their development of the apartments they're building now, and then also the development that's proposed on the west side of the Quiniesca Golf Course. And my understanding is some of the log jams to getting that off the ground and going have been removed. So that's a little bit of a bright light. The other thing that I think is being worked on now, and I'm very interested in helping with, is to raise some private funds for the library piece of that bond. So the bond, the $6.5 million bond, only 3.8 to 4.2 of, not only, but 3.8 to 4.2 of that is for the library. The rest is for improvements to the rest of this sort of complex. And so there's a library subcommittee group trying to raise private funds for that. So I would be very supportive of that. But as I said previously, I think we have to look at creative ways to reduce costs without and reduce how deeply we reach into the residents' pockets. And one way to do that is to become carbon neutral, to find ways to do solar power or to the point where we're not paying such a high utility bill. That's one thing we can do. And I could go on, but I think Brian is reaching for the red card. Yes, he is. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the first part of the question is ideas to deal with the fiscal pressures. If there were easy solutions, we would have done it already, clearly. So I talked a little bit about economic development. We really need to dial up the engagement and commitment to that. I believe we should establish an economic development committee. Jerry and I have talked at length about this. We have the right expertise in town to do this, and it really is critical that we just figure out a way to get the Route 7 corridor revitalized. I talked a bit about form-based code. That is one mechanism that's going to accelerate development. It will make it easier. It'll make it quicker, a much more administrative and predictable process. We need to get the word out on that. We haven't done a great job marketing that. And we may need to, frankly, unclench, for lack of a better word, on what we've done there. I think we did some good work on the form-based code, but it's a challenging area. Retail is super challenged right now, and the corridor is is what it is. So I think focus on that will help. I think a sales and use tax may be something we need to spend some time looking at, frankly. Jerry mentioned quality of service. I agree. This is a conversation we've had on the board. We had it at our all-day budget workshop. There's a need to have a conversation about what level of service does the town want. Those are hard decisions to make, but that conversation needs to happen. The last piece was process. How can we make it more transparent? I think it's pretty transparent right now. Sitting on the board, I guess I'm in a different position, but I feel like town staff has done an excellent job making this process happen earlier in the year than it had in the past. It's structured well, in my opinion. Could we communicate more? Of course. But I feel like the process works pretty well, in my opinion, right now. Always opportunities to fine tune around the edges, but I'm comfortable with the process right now. Thank you.
So, three folks have taken 2/3 of what I needed to talk about and already discussed it. Really, the bottom line is, so how are we, we know all of our expenses. We know we need to bring business into town to generate revenue, we know all of this. How do we do it? And how do we do it and keep the town affordable for its residents? There's a number of ideas, there's a number of ways. The biggest part is it's going to take a lot of feedback from the residents as far as what are they willing to give up for services? What do they want to see? Would you want to see a 1% sales tax to help offset the general fund? There's a lot of questions that would need to be asked to get feedback from the residents and get a outline as far as what we could do to try and offset where we're at right now. The bottom line is it's a fairly significant increase this year. It's going to be worse next year. So what we plan on this year, we're going to have to tighten up even more so next year. And that's if the budget passes. What do we do if it doesn't? How tight are we going to pull back if we have to cut the budget back to get that 10 point whatever % down to a reasonable level the taxpayers are willing to vote through?
And Barbara, this is sort of a follow-up we'll just direct at you, which is the question is, since 80% of property tax goes to the school, how would you address school spending? So.
Interesting. I'll give it a shot. And actually I wanted to be part of this answering group first. I think, I would admit that I'm going to get real in for a treat as far as budgeting on the school board and with the new supervisory union. I think it's going to be very interesting. I had a chance for me to kind of see what the budget buddies were doing, like pulling in the community and attending some of those meetings. I'm not an expert per se, but one thing I would like to tell the community is we all understand how important it is to educate our children. And I think the only problem we have is making sure that people are aware or understand where we are spending. And if we say we need this extra teacher in this school, why are we doing that? So if there is clear communication, I think for that small budget that we have for the school budget within the big budget of the community, people are willing to put that money forward. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think where we would go is communication and making sure that people understand what we are spending the money for. Thank you.
These questions have to do with the salt shed. The salt shed, excuse me. Basically, if the litigation is to continue, do you support that? And if so, would you be willing to conduct a referendum or special vote by the townspeople in terms of continuing funding of this? I guess I'll start with you, Chris.
So, just to clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
So, do we support it?
Do you I would say yes. Do you support continued litigation? And if so, are you in favor of a referendum by the, of conducting a referendum to see if the townspeople are interested in supporting it financially? Because it can't go on without funding.
Right. So, first and foremost, I'm one person of five people that represent you. So it's kind of a little backwards. I think the referendum would be the better way to go to find out what everybody wants out of this. Do we want to see it continue to go? I know my opinion is there's been 3 strikes at this and they all came up negative. And I realize this is an appeal of Judge Sessions' ruling. But he made a 30-page, very detailed ruling and gave 3 solid bites at that apple. So myself personally, I don't think the appeal was the right way to go. I think at this point, before we had even gotten to litigation, we should have gotten to discussions with the railroad and try to resolve the issues in a more personal level. It would be kind of like saying, let's invade North Korea and then ask Kim Jong-un if he wants to negotiate. It was kind of backwards in steps. That's water over the dam. So I'm not myself in favor of the appeal, but I think the referendum to see what the townspeople would want would be the way to go.
Okay. Do I support the appeal? I voted publicly on this, as everybody knows. I voted in favor of the appeal. I've communicated my rationale for the appeal. I'm happy to reiterate that very briefly. To me, it was important to look at the facts and the law on this, which I did, which our town attorney has done. And I believe that the appeal is supportable based on the materials I've seen, based on the research that's been conducted. Secondly, I talked about local control. That's an important theme to me and an important priority on a general basis, and that's the ordinance, certainly not perfect in my opinion, but I believe it's important to maintain local control from a regulatory perspective. Thirdly, there was no fiscal impact associated with the appeal. That was a big one for me, and really the reason that I voted in favor of it. I think we can argue about the third-party funding aspects of this, and that's a good conversation for the community to have. We probably haven't spent enough time on that, and hopefully we have an opportunity in the future to dig into that. Do I support a referendum? I do. I believe that to the extent that there are tax dollars that come into play with respect to whether it's a further appeal, which is possible conceptually, or otherwise, I believe it is appropriate to put it out to the voters for a referendum. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree with my colleague. I'm all for local control, but I'm not for any form of discrimination. And by that I mean, I read Judge Sessions' decision, and he concluded, after the town had ample opportunity to bring experts and evidence before him, that the hazmat ordinance was discriminatory against the railroad. And there were a lot of reasons for that, and I would encourage people to read the decision. So I can't support an ordinance that was designed and created to be discriminatory against a business, whatever that business is. And let me be clear, I'm all for environmental protection of our local community, but I think we need to understand a couple things about the salt shed. One, it's a state-of-the-art facility that complies with all state and federal requirements. And in the one instance where it didn't meet that, it was swiftly corrected, and the state is continuing to monitor the salt shed. I don't believe the same can be true for Shelburne's own salt shed. Second, I disagree that accepting private monies to underwrite the lawsuit is good policy. In fact, I think it's bad policy. And the reason I think that is because we cannot privatize town action. It's fine to have somebody contribute to the library, in my opinion, but privatizing town action sets a dangerous precedent. It's very close to play to pay, and that has no place in representative government. I'd like to think about the referendum because this is what you need to know, and I'm going to go over right now. So what you need to know, and what I think I can tell you with great confidence, is that in the unlikely event the appeal is granted and there's a reverse and a remand, what that means is that we get to spend another $500,000 on litigation that might result in the same result we have now. I don't support that.
I voted against the appeal, which has since been filed. So the appeal is fact. I did so because I believed there were alternatives to continuing the litigation. And my preference was to meet with the other party, to establish some common ground, and seek to resolve problems that remain like noise, which are not even addressed in the litigation. Further, I had serious misgivings about accepting private monies, however noble, however well-meaning the source, for an activity that the town, if it were so courageous about appeal, I felt should have funded it itself. The remainder of the question is difficult to answer because we are in the process of an appeal in New York in federal courts without any real understanding of time, of the likelihood of decision, of what occurs when the costs mount to the point where the offer by the town attorney to bear a certain amount of it, over $20,000, begins to be problematic, about what happens when indeed the $20,000 is exhausted, and there are on the horizon the first of demands for increased funding from the town. But it's all speculative at this point. I think in abstract and in principle, there should have been room for more votes, not least on the select board's part, publicly, on continuing this litigation. And in any future, with the prospect of any future continuance, I do feel there should be some greater public involvement.
The next question relates to Article 7 and the regional dispatch. And I guess the question really is for the select board candidates, do you feel that there are, well, if you could maybe detail what you think the benefits and potential losses might be for local control for the regional dispatch.
You know, in a way, this is also a little speculative as a question, because what we're going to be asked to vote on is the first of two steps. The first step is whether Shelburne wants to join as an original member a group which is putting together the detailed organization and other arrangements for a consolidated regional dispatch center. We're being asked to come to the table and sit as one of the forming members. A second stage and a second vote townwide later, or it will be, I should say quickly, my preference that it be townwide. At the moment, it's identified as the select board vote, but a second vote within 2 years is actually the vote which commits funding and transfer of personnel and a number of other things. It seems to me that we should not lose the opportunity to join in the first discussions, the original discussions, the forming of this organization, which if we decide is not to our liking, which if we decide compromises our sense of local control or our confidence in our own dispatch, then we would have an opportunity to vote down any further involvement, to simply not vote to continue. I think it would be a mistake, frankly, however, not to be at that table as this center is formed, to not be part of the discussions of how it is to be formed, who will contribute what in what amount. And I say that particularly and especially because Shelburne has a jewel of an offering here. We are a PSAP, which the formative body dispatch center is not and will want to be. So I think we have some important leverage in the initial discussions. Thank you, Brian.
What Jerry said. To say, I agree with him completely. We should have a seat at the table.
I voted on this as well. I voted as Jerry did. I voted in favor of making this a ballot measure. I have my own questions and concerns about this, including what this means as far as local control goes. What was compelling to me as the new guy on the board who saw the presentations and hasn't spent 2 years on this, as town staff has as a member of the Joint Planning Committee, was the improved response time. If we lived our lives in Shelburne 100% of the time, then this is an easy decision. We'd never do it. That's not the case for most people. So I'm hopeful that there will be more communication about this. I think in a perfect world, the sequencing of the vote would be a little bit different. Chris and I had a chance to talk about this. Putting this on the ballot felt like the right step at this point to try to get the pulse of the community on whether this is something that a select board should spend additional time on, whether it's a year, whether it's 2 years, as Jerry mentioned. There's time to get into the weeds on this and look at the fiscal impacts as well as considerations of, headcount, right? We're talking about moving the location from here to possibly somewhere in South Burlington. So with that, I support putting it on the ballot. I think much more work and investigation and diligence is needed to better understand it. Thank you.
Discussions are always good, and it's good if both sides are looked at. So there are benefits to a regionalized dispatch, all the dispatching times and whatnot that were discussed already. My concerns with it are, so right now as a PSAP, we dispatch for 32 communities. That's 32 communities that pay our town for that service. So not all of those communities are within Chittenden County. This is going to be a Chittenden County dispatch. So does that mean the Addison County agencies, the Grand Isle County agencies, are they cast to the wind? What happens to those folks? We should think about our neighbors and how that's going to impact them as well. And what happens with the revenue? We're going to go from something that helps to sustain its operation to a sole debt payment. We will be paying somebody for the service now. We won't be getting any revenue to help offset costs. The other side of it, there's little nuances for this town that are a huge benefit. If, God forbid, rescue gets dispatched to somebody's house in the middle of a snowstorm, that dispatch is sent over the simulcasted frequency for the town highway department. And the road superintendent typically takes and finds out if somebody's in that area and is plowing that road, or does he need to get resources to get a path plowed for the ambulance so it's got a safe travel route to get to your house. That's going to be lost when it goes to regionalized dispatch, because they're not going to simulcast with the highway department, the water department, the sewer department, who may have a road dug up for a water main break. So there's a lot of different little components to this that all add up. We need to look at the whole picture, not just the snapshot.
So the next couple of questions together are basically relating to ethics. And the first is it possible for a select board member to vote on a question relating to an organization that the member has supported financially and still properly serve the public that elected them? And I want to follow that up with another one of the questions relating to ethics, which is how do you feel about giving the ethics committee the financial means of seeking legal counsel? So two-part question for the select board members. Why don't we start with Mary?
I hope I didn't get the question backwards on the
Okay,
first
well,
half. Can you say it
So
again?
the first one, is it possible for a select board member to vote on a question relating to an organization that the member has supported
Okay, thank you.
financially and still properly serve the public that elected them? So I guess you would just sort of,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Yes, is the short answer to that, because the select board serves as sort of an executive function, not a judicial function. So on the DRB, that would be inappropriate because you need to be impartial. But as an elected official, it is not necessary that you be impartial. It's not a requirement. I could have an agenda. So, for example, I am partial to solar power. I have an agenda that I want to see the town have solar power. So I think it's okay if I've given to an environmental cause in that regard. One might question me if it were the other way around. If someone had given me thousands of dollars to run for select board, you might want to know that, which is why we have our campaign finance laws where I have to give repeated disclosure. That kind of thing. So I think it's perfectly fine in this context to take up matters that involve organizations that I may have supported in the past. The second part of the question is, do I support the town getting some funds for the ethics committee for legal counsel? Absolutely. I don't have any hesitation whatsoever that all of our committees should be funded in a responsible way so that they can serve the purposes for which they were organized.
Oh, that's a little baffling, that question. I mean, if you give to the food shelf and to the farms and to the rescue squad, somehow I don't think that compromises my integrity as a board member. I think it's a question of proportion. On the other hand, technically and rigidly, on an absolute yes or no basis, I think my second comment would be the select board is by and large a policy-making body. It acts in very few cases in a quasi-judicial way, as Mary has thankfully explained, and in fact, thankfully, I can use her comments, which are helpful. I think the issue further can be understood in terms of identifying potential conflict, as we do routinely in decision-making, and leaving it up to our colleagues and to the public itself as to whether that's a compromising situation. In terms of the supply of counsel to any of the committees, boards and commissions of the town, it runs to further than just the ethics committee. My feeling has always been that there should be access to funds as needed, particularly in cases where the decision makers on that funding are at issue. That's a very complicated question, and I would look forward to someone who's far better able than I to explore the innards of it.
I concur with Mary and Jerry on that. Of course, a select board member could vote on an issue that he or she has personally contributed to. That's why we have an ethics and conflicts of interest ordinance that provides for disclosures to the extent that the member or public official believes that it's appropriate to disclose it. As Jerry said, you could be a member of the museum and, of course, vote in an impartial and unbiased manner on an issue that comes before the board. I think that's routine. I think that's why we have a conflict of interest ordinance. So hopefully that answers the question. With respect to funding the Ethics Committee, I agree. An allocation is appropriate for all committees, boards, and commissions that require outside legal counsel, whether it's the town attorney or otherwise. I think, this is par for the course in many ways. The DRB, Mary can speak to this. We instituted on the record review a couple years back, and we've spent some outside counsel money figuring that process out. That was relatively painless, as far as I know, your request for funding, and I believe it's appropriate to fund any board or committee that requests it after consideration by the town manager, who ultimately controls the budget. Thank you.
So the biggest thing is communications. I keep saying that, communications. But if somebody's got they may not even perceive it as a conflict themselves. If they converse it at a board meeting, if there's a vote that's coming up and I have this involvement, and what do you all think? And the public that's there gets the chance to chime in at the same time. Everybody comes to a consensus, and it makes it much more transparent. And really, that's where we need to be, with a lot of transparency. So even if one doesn't perceive it's a conflict, to just bring it out so that there is no perceived conflict, that would be a good resolution for everybody in the end. As far as the fundings go, I'd like to take that one step further. I think the boards and commissions, there's legal staff for the select board. Maybe there should be an independent attorneys group that's retained with a set dollar figure that handles the boards and commissions. And I know there's been discussion about the town manager feels, well, it could be a conflict. If he's overseeing that, then maybe we come up with a policy or a protocol that if there's fundings that are needed for this legal team to deal with the boards and commissions, that it goes through the financial director to keep the town manager from having a conflict. We've got to find a way to resolve it. Thank you.
There are a couple of questions here, really in response to the recent shootings in Florida. And I guess the best way to phrase this would be what thoughts you might have on how Shelburne can respond to recent school shootings and the issues concerning the Black Lives Matter. And I'd like you to, respond to this as well as the select board. So just thoughts that you may have given. All right. Why don't we start with you, Barbara?
So as far as the recent shootings, and I did mention this as part of my priority, whether I can execute it, but at least I have the idea, and I think sharing it with the rest of the board members will be important. So for the shooting that occurred, I don't know if everybody knows kind of the history. So this is a disturbed child who doesn't have parents and does need help. So as they do something within our school, they go out there. There are programs maybe they engaged in, but we don't know. So as a school, because tomorrow that child will be back, making sure that there is a program that we are channeling through in the community that can help that individual, put them back. And as they come back to us, we understand what are they getting, what are they missing. So it's not as we let them out of our school, that's it. So that's number one for us, which I think is big. Black Lives Matters, I think that's, one of the things actually that brought me into running for school board is some of the racial issues we have experienced in the school. I think it's all, lessons for us to learn, lessons for the schools to learn. But what is important is being able to address diversity awareness. We all know how hard a conversation it is, but making sure that there is that awareness and our children do understand it, because tomorrow they're going to be out there in the world and it's tougher than this small community in Vermont. Thank you.
I will never understand or accept that there is any kind of compelling need for anyone in this country to own and operate a military-style, rapid-fire war weapon. Period. I came up through NRA with 22s. I was an indifferent hunter to the point where very often I would go with friends without a load. I respect the traditions, the beliefs and opinions, but I have never, ever countenanced the extension of those to weapons of war. And I think individually, anything we can do on an hourly basis to stop it, to control it, to finish off the belief that somehow this is acceptable and patriotic and an enduring right, we should. That's on a personal level. As a select board member and a representative of you, I'm intrigued by some ideas that have emerged, in fact, in discussions we've had already in this campaign, by the sense that perhaps Shelburne, as a community, as a unique, special community, might take some steps, might design some advocacy, as Mary has already indicated, in carbon footprints, and take the lead, if not in our area, but in the state, to urge greater and finer controls.
This is an issue that is hard to talk about for me personally without actually tearing up. What happened last week is an unspeakable tragedy, but I don't think our leaders understand the depth with which it's affecting the children we send to school every day. And if you read the same articles I read, the children who were interviewed had already, prior to this tragedy, talked about the fact that if they were going to get shot, that was the guy who was going to do it. We are sending our children to school worrying about who it is among them is going to shoot them. That is upside down and wrong, and it's appalling to me. But I'm encouraged because we're Vermonters, and we are often the first to correct wrongs. And I have in mind two things that Vermont was first at: abolition and gay marriage. This little state can do a lot, and I have confidence that this state, starting right here in this room in Shelburne, can participate in that movement and be part of the change that is necessary to keep our children safe. And I intend to be part of that if elected. Thank you.
I echo Mary and Jerry's sentiments here. It's a public health crisis. It's tragic. It's shameful that we haven't been able to do anything about this at this point. I think it needs to come from the people. Clearly, I know we can talk and talk and talk about this, but ultimately it's our representatives who vote on this, and it will come down to anybody who doesn't support an assault weapons ban needs to be voted out. I think that is the only thing that can start to make change here. With respect to bringing it local and not turning it into a conversation about national gun control, this is a timely question in a lot of ways. This Shelburne Community School is reacting and very proactive on this front. We received an email a couple days back from Scott Sevo just informing parents about what actions are being taken with respect to site security. They have a very robust program in process. They've had outside consultants come in looking at access points, and they're making changes to improve that process. So I'm confident that the administration and the school board have this well under control, and that they're doing everything they can to protect our children. Black Lives Matter absolutely need to have this conversation. I echo your point about diversity training. I grew up in a very socioeconomically diverse town, and that's not where we live. And that this conversation is more challenging because of that with our children. And we need to spend more time on it. We need to make it a priority. And I absolutely endorse making that happen. Thank you.
So, I graduated high school in 1982. A much different time span than it is now. You didn't have any kind of violence like you see now in schools. What happened in Florida is a terrible tragedy. I can't even imagine what those parents are going through. I think in this state, we are a little bit ahead of the curveball because we've had some close calls here recently. Fairhaven, there was a school scare there, but that was resolved through people opening up, getting the word out when threats were received, and the system took care of the problem. Today there was another one up in Fairfax, and it was the same thing. The threat was brought to the school's attention, and it was taken care of. Is it the only way this is going to be resolved? We're in a different time span. When I was in high school in 1970s, 80s, it's much different than it is now. We didn't even have school resource officers then. So maybe there's other venues that need to be looked at other than just not so much, I know there's a lot of talk about gun control, but also control of what's coming into the school and what resources can be there to deal with threats when they happen. Because it's not just guns. There's knives that go into the school. There's all kinds of things that go into the school, including drugs. And those all have to be looked at. With diversity, I believe this town, that's something it can handle, that it handles, and we're all open-minded and can converse with each other and have that conversation. Thank you.
So I think at this point, if people would like a 1-minute closing opportunity, this is the time to do it, and then we will adjourn to the discussion with the candidates individually. And I just want to mention there are some other topics here that were on cards. One is the traffic situation in the village. Another was how to encourage new businesses. You touched on that slightly, but to expand on that. Possible downsizing of the library project, oversight of the town manager's office, and ramifications of reclassifying the La Platte River wetlands from Class 2 to Class 1. So we unfortunately don't have the time to get details on those, but anyway, those are some other thoughts that people put on their cards.
Candidates prepare give them another second or two to think about your concluding statement. I want to thank everybody for attending. Urge you again not only to vote, but bring your neighbors out. Remind them there's early voting, there's voter registration forms, etc. And I want to be sure to thank my sweetie, Brian Flynn, for being a on-time timekeeper. For all of you for participating and obviously preparing. Thank you, Lee, for assisting.
Lee helped with the questions.
David Webster and David, thank you so very much for stepping in for Tom. The VCAM is here. VCAM folks, can you tell me, is this been live streamed or yes? So Tom Little, if you're watching, know that everybody's wishing you a speedy recovery as possible. Take care of yourself. We'll see you at town meeting. And thank you again, and now the candidates can present. Oh, and I also want to remind you, there'll be some time to mingle, and the town manager will come in shortly after to talk about the other ballot item.
Okay. Diana, why don't you?
I just want to thank you all again for coming and listening to us. Monday, March 5th, there'll be a town dinner at Shelburne Community School at 5:30, and then our representatives, Webb and Brumstead, will speak and bring us a little update. And then at 7:30, the town meeting will start in the gym. And then we have the paper ballot March 6th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you so much, and I really look forward. I really hope you vote for me, and I get to be your town clerk for another 3 years.
Thank you all for coming. I realize I'm going to have a lot to learn. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be open to ideas. And I look forward to serving you all on the board. And please vote for me.
Thank you as well. Thank you, Dave, and David, who stepped in on fairly short notice. We appreciate that. Thank you especially for coming to meetings. And I hope you will continue to do that, because you are an inspiration to those of us who sit behind here. You are not critics, you are exemplars. So please do continue to keep coming. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you. I hope you'll support my candidacy. I want to again express a great admiration for the quality of candidates we have. It speaks very well of Shelburne and our future.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening. It's been a great experience for us, and I hope it's the same for you. It's truly a privilege to serve you and the town on the select board, and I hope to have the opportunity to do it going forward. We live in a very special place. I am very invested in this town, and I feel very strongly about seeing it towards its future. Again, I'd like to echo your comments. It's a privilege to sit up here with everyone, in particular my opponent. He's an exemplary public servant, as everyone knows. Former fire chief, he's served his country, very experienced, and I applaud you for running a positive campaign, which we both agreed to do. I think democracy works best when people have choices, and you have two good candidates to choose from. Hope to have your support, and thank you again for your engagement.
Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. It's a great opportunity for me to share my thoughts with all of you. And I would just, in closing, say that I think Shelburne is a jewel of Chittenden County, not least because of the wonderful people who live here. And I want the opportunity to serve you and keep an open mind and have channels of communication going at all times. There's no doubt we have some really formidable issues to tackle, and I think we can do that if we all work together and be open-minded, and that's what I intend to do if elected. Thank you very much.
Folks, thank you for stepping in, David, and everybody getting this done. Thank you to the Shelburne News for hosting this. Thanks everybody for coming. The one thing I would ask of everybody, please get out and talk with your neighbors and make sure they understand just how important it is to get out and vote. Voter attendance has been very low in this town for quite an extended period of time. Maybe together we can all get our neighbors to get rallied and show up. If they need, they can go to the Secretary of State's website and get an absentee ballot request, and they do not have to show up on March 6th. Although I'm sure Diane would be happy to see everybody's smiling faces. But please, let's increase voter attendance. I'd appreciate your support, but if not, thank you for at least getting out and voting. Thank you.
We ask you to stay a few minutes later to hear the manager, but let's spend 10 or 15 minutes face to face. Say anything?
Be very short. If there's questions, I'll sit here and answer them as long as I can. So first, I just want to explain what Article 7 is asking, just in case there's any confusion. Article 7 is not asking Shelburne or anyone else to join regional dispatch and to start regional dispatch. Let's make sure we're clear about it. Article 7 is asking, and it's on 7 or 8 different town meeting warnings in Chittenden County, for the various communities to enter into this agreement, a municipal union district to do regional dispatching. A municipal union district is a mechanism that was allowed for by the legislature that is pre-authorized. So unlike a town charter, an agreement is very similar to a municipal charter, but it does not require legislative approval once it's completed, like a municipal charter. It was developed by the state legislature specifically for this reason, to kind of incentivize or to help communities like Shelburne and neighboring communities in Chittenden County get together and deliver services with a shared governance approach. And the agreement reads very, very similar to a municipal charter. It talks about when the budget is due, how officers will be appointed, what the voting rights of the different communities are. Believe it or not, I know a lot of things kind of got lost in the shuffle over the last year because bandwidth from the select board and others were put towards a number of other things, but this did come before the select board 2 or 3 times. All of the comments that were requested by the select board were actually incorporated in, by Shelburne Select Board, were incorporated into the final agreement. This agreement has been approved by Vermont State's Attorney, and this is the agreement that the different communities are voting on joining. Now, if a yes vote simply means that Shelburne would have a seat on the governing board of this entity. A yes vote does not mean we're purchasing services. It does not mean that we owe anything to this group. It's simply a vote to have a seat at the table on the governing body. Unlike a private business where it might take you an hour to get on the state's the Secretary of State's website and fill out the LLC paperwork and boom, you're done. To do a startup government, what this is kind of like is a 1 to 3 year process, and this is somewhere towards the beginning of it. The next steps, if Shelburne and other communities join the municipal union district, will be to iron out the operating details, and then a subsequent vote within the next 12 to 24 months would be required by the Shelburne Select Board at that time to actually receive and purchase services from this entity. So I can stop there because honestly, that is the question at hand on Article 7. It's not about all the other stuff. I can talk about all the other stuff that goes along with regional dispatch, but I will stop there if there's any questions specifically about this step in the process. Sean?
So I do have a question. So if the vote of Shelburne for this particular ballot is no, does Shelburne have a chance to jump on the bandwagon later when they like how it looks, or not, and not if they don't like how it looks?
Sure.
Or, I mean, yes, I see, if this vote is no, we're not on the governing board. Does that cut us out of the package totally later on down the line?
No, it does not cut us out of the package or the ability to go to Union Municipal District meetings. We won't have a vote or a seat at the table. It certainly doesn't mean, kind of like the public comes to Shelburne Select Board meetings, that we wouldn't be able to send a representative or multiple representatives to have input. Shelburne would not have an official vote on the governing body. So certainly Shelburne could join the governing body later, but many, I would say, of the important decisions that will be made at the beginning of as this new entity is formulated will happen by that governing board before any services are purchased or any money exchanges hands.
And one last addendum to that. How many townships are voting on this, and how many people are on that governing board?
So the town meeting vote, I have this in my notes. You can count along with me. Are Shelburne, Burlington, Colchester, Milton, South Burlington, Williston, and Winooski. All have this on their article, on their town meeting articles, reads identical to the one that is on Shelburne's.
So if 5 vote
If
yes,
3 or more vote yes, the fund will start.
and with those 3 towns on the governing board.
Excuse me.
with those three entities?
If three communities, I mean, I'll pick three, Burlington, Shelburne, Colchester, vote yes and the others vote no, those three will be the three governing bodies of this new entity. Certainly, those other communities that voted no would have an opportunity at a special town meeting or another regular town meeting to take it up again and vote to get on the governing body.
Equal votes, no matter the size of the township?
Right, so that was I mean, obviously that was one of the many things that has been a stumbling block to have regional dispatch take shape over the 50 years that it's been talked about, are things like, well, Burlington should get 2 votes to everyone else's 1 vote. Like I said, this agreement, very actually identical to a municipal charter, spells out what the voting rights are. In this case, every community gets 1 vote. It talks about when the budget's due. It talks about how the budget mechanism, how the funding mechanism will work. And this document, again, did come before the select board multiple times. The comments that the board made, it didn't have to be incorporated into the document, but they were. And that document went to TJ Donovan's desk, and he approved it. And now it's going, like I said, to the different town meetings for people to vote, again, to be on the governing body.
Okay, thank you.
Josh?
And I wasn't really going to say anything, but I think you presented a fairly simplistic view of what that document says with regard to voting rights. That yes, for some things, there may be 1 vote, 1 town. But for a substantive thing, for voting on the budget, it's based on call volume. And certainly, Burlington, South Burlington, larger communities are going to have a much larger say in the budget, which is going to drive the whole process than.
I think Josh, I think that part of it comes up if the budget increases more than a certain percent. You're right. I'm not going into the fine details of this agreement. I mean, we could talk about this for quite a while. I just want to say that this is the document that is the governing charter of the community.
Online?
This is online.
Okay.
Through my weekly updates, believe it or not, I've linked to it a number of times. But this is, and it has been online since at least July.
Can we just hear the rest of it?
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to point out that you can present this as a simple thing but and I will use the term that I heard before. Yes, in things like this, you'd like to have a seat at the table, but you have to decide ahead of time if it's a table you really want to sit at, and if it's going to be in your best interest. And I think that's the thing that the voters have to decide is this something we want to spend our time on at this point? As Sean says, or asks, is this is something that has so few details associated with it that there may be some advantages to waiting and seeing how it all comes out.
Yeah. So I just would like to say that, again, all of the select board's comments were unanimously supported and were incorporated into this document. There was not one comment or suggestion that the Shelburne Select Board made that was not incorporated into this document at the time. I completely agree with Josh that there are a lot of operational details to be worked out before me or anyone would recommend actually joining as a paying member of something like this. But those details are going to be worked out by the members of this governing body. So that's why there's the next step, which is between 12 and 24 months in the future, that the select board at that time would be responsible for deciding, have those details that definitely need to be worked out. There's no question a lot of operational details need to be worked out. Have those details been worked out, and are we convinced that this is the right thing for Shelburne? Today, I mean, that would be an insane thing for Shelburne to vote yes on, because none of that has has been worked out. I would suggest that Shelburne may be best positioned to have a voice in that discussion if it has a seat at the governing body. And that is a completely separate question than should it then join? That's, I think, again, a question that would need to be worked out in 12 to 24 months. But at this point, it's simply a vote to be on the governing body to have the most impactful voice it can on those operational details that need to be worked out.
So what happens to the, it was mentioned earlier, like the Addison County neighbors?
Yeah.
If you suddenly decide to do this, and that map looks like it's already out of date. I don't see, looks like Grand Isle County should be blue because they're part of Shelburne's dispatch. And
Well, that's
towns
been-
would be cast aside
That,
from what they said.
I'll go over that map in, I'll get to that. I can't, I mean, this map actually, the color shows the 911 PSAP, primary PSAP locations, not the entities that we dispatch with. I'll save that for the end. Are there any other questions about this agreement and kind of what this vote is asking for at town meeting? Mary?
I think, Joe, you have to explain a little bit more so that people can feel a little bit more informed. And my concern is, I want to make sure that, I know you can't say for sure, but how is this going to impact the people who work downstairs right now?
Yeah, and it's hard for me to say that, so this is jumping ahead for some of the things, but there has been some, so one of the reasons it's hard for me to say too much, I mean, we've been, as a joint survey committee, have been advised by legal counsel, not the town's attorney, but there's a different legal counsel, actually. Karen Stackpole, some of you may know, is a Shelburne resident, happens to be a Shelburne resident, has been especially helping us with the HR portion of this. And we've been advised that we have to be careful not to run into any sort of unfair labor practices. Having said that, so I mean, if you ask me exactly how this can impact people in Shelburne Dispatch, if this goes through, like let's say it all becomes operational, then dispatchers, not just in Shelburne and Chittenden County, would no longer be employees of their municipalities. They would then be employees of this new entity. So, I mean, I guess
have to apply for a job,
Or are they guaranteed a job?
become an automatic.
these are where the parts about the unfair labor practices come into play. I can't sit here and guarantee anyone anything, especially since I wouldn't be able to be on I wouldn't necessarily be on the governing body. I certainly wouldn't be the executive director. But without question, they would no longer be employees of Colchester, South Burlington, Burlington, or Shelburne. They would be employees of the CCPSA.
Are you in favor of this and why?
No, I'm not. I am in favor of Shelburne. I believe it is in Shelburne's best interest to vote yes on Article 7 to be on the governing body. I definitely, I think it's way too early for anyone to make a definitive conclusion about whether or not doing this as paying for and receiving services through the regional entity is in the best interest of Shelburne or any other community. I think it's a legitimate question. It's been a legitimate enough question that it's been looked at and proposed and looked at and studied again since 1967. But it's way too early for anyone to say, yeah, definitely do it. But I do think it would be short-sighted potentially for Shelburne to cut itself out of being a decision maker at this stage. I do think, you know, in the future, if it was like, well, we don't like the way that the operational plan has been built or we're not convinced yet, okay, then let's take a step back, let it go for a year or two, and then maybe it works out and maybe we think it's great, or maybe we don't think it is. But to cut Shelburne out of this stage, I think would be more harmful than good.
Since there seem to be many questions, and
Yep.
this is, you know, we're done in
Sure.
terms of the candidates forum, but there seem to be many questions, more than I had thought about, perhaps an informational session. I don't know how much you can get into tonight, but to have a larger audience would be useful.
Yeah, I was telling Jerry's story. I was really planning on this, and then birth of my son kind of gotten, But yes, between now and town meeting, I agree. I definitely want to plan something a little bit more than this. So.
Because that would be my concern, is Nancy's. How exact is that ballot measure? Does this say this is just a seat on the board that you're voting for, and if you vote for this, we have not joined the board, we have another vote coming up? For Joe Public, sorry for your name, but for Jane Public, who doesn't sit on these things, and all of a sudden gets a flyer, don't or yes, and they're going, what the hell is this thing?
I agree. The wording on the ballot item is what is the statutory requirement. It barely reads the way that the result would be one way or the other. I understand that. I did my best in something that I submitted to Shelburne News to explain it for this week. But I agree, it's a very nuanced kind of ballot request. We quickly go into, well, should we do regional dispatch? That's not the question here. and it is tough because the article has to be written a certain way, and this is the exact same way it is placed on every single other community's ballot.
So eventually, and I realize right now this is just, do we get a seat on the board, or should we get a seat on the board? But eventually there are a lot of other questions that need to be answered.
Yep.
And this board is going to be dealing with, like you said, structure as far as operation, budget, that kind of stuff. At what point do we learn what we lose as far as, you've got the revenue right now of the departments we dispatch for.
Mm-hmm.
If we give that up and go to paying an entity, what is the cost impact to the taxpayers? And what little nuances do we lose? Like highway, water, sewer utilize our dispatch right now, services as well. And our emergency services get to capitalize on them knowing where they're going. All that gets lost when we get to the regionalized level.
Yeah, potentially. There's no question. Again, these would be the discussion that the next select board, I hope, really digs its teeth in, not just the select board, but the public, because like I tried to, when I answered Mary's question, I'm not convinced that at the end of the day, this is the right thing for Shelburne. There are a lot of those unintended consequences. The one that actually strikes me as most important for Shelburne to think, a lot of times, I don't know if I've ever done this for Mary or for Josh, but I leave documents for people because they can't come here during normal business hours, but they might be able to swing by at 11 o'clock at night, and you get to pick it up from the dispatch center. It's really convenient. It's a nice service. There's always someone here. Mm-hmm. That would potentially change, right? So there are a lot of things for Shelburne to think about beyond the service. So to go back to what the history of this dates back to 1967. I don't need to go through all that with anyone here. The recent history really dates back to 2015, and it comes out of a Shelburne Select Board retreat in 2015 when the direction was something, really clear, like, hey, Joe, go and figure out something about dispatch. The reason so it costs Shelburne in our new budget, it's about $700,000 a year to run our dispatch center. That's offset by approximately $350,000 worth of revenue coming in from the state for being part of the 911 system and then all of our contracts. So at the end of the day, Shelburne is eating $350,000. And the question is, and it's still an outstanding question in terms of unanswered, is that just the cost of doing business, $350,000? Are we taking it on the chin, or are we coming out a little bit ahead? And that was really what prompted this whole exercise since 2015. I met with South Burlington City Manager Kevin Dorn. We had just worked out the stormwater partnership. We were kind of flying high, doing these things, and said, hey, my select board has figured out dispatch. We worked on stormwater together. anything here, what do you think with dispatch? And from that, it was really a grassroots effort between managers. Burlington's mayor has been involved. Chief Del Pozo, Chief Locke has been on the joint survey committee from Burlington, and many others. It was kind of a grassroots effort that came out of that select board retreat, quite frankly. And here we are. And that is the question that the next select board will have to weigh, right? Are the potential benefits to public safety, do they outweigh some of the things that Shelburne may have to give up? Things like not having coverage down there 24/7. I get that.
The scary part with that is it's almost like playing craps. Once you get to the point, everything's all laid out and you kind of know what the operating budget's going to be for the center to work. But the expenses only get broke up and the cost minimized if more join in. So Shelburne looks to join. There's no guarantee that it's going to be every single Chittenden County department or agency joining. Every town in Chittenden County doesn't have to join.
Nope.
So if it's only 3, the expenses are gonna be pretty astronomical versus if it's 13.
Could be. It could be. When I say 3, I mean theoretically it can start with 3. We had a national consultant, Delta Works, who has studied regional dispatching all around the country, not just in Chittenden County. I mean, we're hardly blazing new trails by doing regional dispatch. It's done this way throughout the country in many different ways. And really the community that's most important to make this work. Shelburne's important because of the 911 part, but Burlington's call volume is necessary to make the economics work. So Burlington means a lot if the economics are going to work for everyone in the community because their call volume is so great.
So if we sit, I'm sorry to keep asking, I'm trying to understand something.
No, I get it. It's not. I've been working out for 2 years, and I kind of understand it.
So if we sit on the board and we join, and Burlington has 5,000 calls and Shelburne has 1,000 calls, just to be simple. Does Burlington pay more for the service?
Yes, Burlington will pay more for the service.
And we pay
Well,
per
there's a per call cost. Yep. So
has implications on other things. So then Shelburne goes after problem areas to try to clean them up, so we won't have as many calls for that area. I mean, I'm going to a certain specific problem child that Shelburne has had for a while or feels they have.
So it might be helpful if I can explain real quick what the concept of a regional dispatch, Chittenden County Regional Dispatch Center is attempting to solve. Would that be helpful? Because I think that might help. I will make it quick. You guys can leave. So this is a map of the 911 system for Vermont. And Shelburne is part of the state's 911 system. We are one of 6 PSAP locations. That means that if you call 911 in the state, Shelburne is one of the call taking. If you live in Shelburne and something terrible happens, hold on one second. Yeah. If you live in Shelburne and something terrible happens, you are actually living in the best of all possible worlds, given that. And that is because if you call 911 and it goes to Shelburne's dispatch center, because we are a 911 call taking center. And it just so happens that the person who picks up the call downstairs will immediately dispatch out the fire, police, or rescue person who can get to your house the quickest. So, I mean, if a bad situation happens and you live in Shelburne, relative to anywhere else in the state, you're in good shape, better shape. Let's take the same example where, let's say you are shopping on Church Street and something happens and you call 911. The primary 911 center for Burlington is Williston State Police. That 911 call will go to Williston State Police. Then that 911 call taker, unlike what had happened to you in Shelburne, where the same person picks up the phone and dispatches out the rescue and ambulance and police service, that 911 call taker in Williston State Police will transfer over the call to Burlington, and then Burlington will send out the appropriate response personnel to you. That transfer time, on average, costs 70 seconds. 70 seconds on average. Sometimes it's 15 seconds, sometimes it's 3 minutes. Average is 70 seconds. And it's like that in Chittenden County, where the calls are the highest in the state, because we have this bifurcated system where some of Chittenden County is covered by Shelburne and some is covered by Williston State Police. The theory of putting all of Chittenden County under the 911 call taking and dispatching under one roof, where all calls are answered like the one that I described in Shelburne, is what the goal is at the end of the day, to improve public safety services. Also, it's possible, for example, if you either live or are on the northern end of Shelburne, that the closest responder could be a South Burlington police officer or a firefighter. The regional center will be able to better identify the closest and most efficient responders to incidents in Chittenden County. At the end of the day, that is the problem that's attempting to be solved through this entity.
So until then, we shouldn't shop on Church Street, just in case.
So that, I mean,
No, I'm teasing.
no, I understand. So that is but let's play the perfect scenario that I just described in Shelburne. And let's say that we have two dispatchers on, and you have and they're already on a 911 call, and you have a tragedy at your house, or your neighbor does, and you're calling 911. No longer does that perfect system exist where it's going to go to Shelburne and they're going to dispatch someone else out immediately. It's going to get, that 911 call is going to get kicked to the next person on the state system who has gone the longest without taking a call. Could be anywhere. Let's just say it's St. Albans. Now the 911 call goes to St. Albans. That 911 call taker in St. Albans is going to then transfer it back on a different line to this same Shelburne call taker who was tied up on a 911 call to take the dispatching call. Again, that's where the inefficiencies in the system and that 70-second average lag time is created, by those transfers. And by, again, the idea of combining Chittenden County under one roof with all the dispatchers in one area taking 911 calls and dispatching out immediately, is more likely that the responders are going to get there as quick as possible.
Well, I hate to say it, but your presentation and Josh's presentation somehow should go to the public together. But let's face it, we had a library pass with 1,600 people voting. So.
And I want to be clear, I'm really not advocating to anyone that regional dispatching should happen or a new entity. I mean, actually, there was a lot of things that Josh brought up that I 100% agree with in his presentation.
As well as I do.
I do share Josh's concerns about starting a new regional entity. I mean, that's another layer of government. I get it. I have concerns there too. There are a lot of concerns that Josh brought up in terms of the details that need to be ironed out with the operation. I agree, except for the only way to really be able to iron those out is to have a seat at the table on this governing body as it moves forward, and then say, hey, these details are ironed out, we don't like them, and we're not going to join.
And
that makes sense.
That was a huge revelation to me. I mean, if I'm going to join something, I'd rather sit and talk about it before I join than say, okay, I don't like it.
Yeah, so by voting yes again, it's only joining the governing body. It's not joining as a paying member.
And it does not commit us to having to the road.
Absolutely not. It only allows us a seat at the table on the governing body as these operational details are made. And like I said, sometime within the next 12 to 24 months, the board at that time will make a determination of whether or not to join as a paying member who also receives services.
More complicated questions to come.
So, isn't it true, though, that in that document,
Which
if
document?
the agreement document, as it states now, if any monies are spent by this organization before even the second vote is taken, we're still responsible for paying for whatever money has been spent, is what it says in that document.
I'd have to read it closer, Josh. I'm not sure what that.
So getting out, I mean, once we have a seat at the table, taking our seat away from the table is not unencumbered.
You're saying if there's legal expenses and coming up with the operational process and yada yada, those expenses get split amongst everybody who's at the table.
Correct.
Just who's paying for everything right now?
The only expense that we've had was we hired the Delta Works, and that every municipality pitched in a few bucks to do that. Shelburne pitched in about $2,500, I believe. That was 2016. That's the only money that's been spent. Some decisions have been made. For example, Burlington purchased a computer-aided dispatching software system. They could have chosen a number of different platforms. They chose to purchase one that could be transferred into this system. So they chose a $500,000 software program with the eye towards, well, let's not buy it for Burlington only, but one that could incorporate a regional component. So some decisions like that have been made already, but there are no expenses that are planned at this point.
But like Karen Stackpole has been doing some work and other people have been doing work.
And that was all out of that amount that we put in 2015 or 16. Shelburne put in 2,500.
Was that a
Every
select board
town,
decision?
every town put that in? That was-
Every town put in it was based on their size of the community. So Burlington, Colchester, and Essex put in more than Shelburne.
Why did Essex not, why are they not voting on it? I saw they weren't, but I don't quite, what have you been told as to why they're not voting?
I'm not familiar with what goes on in Essex.
Yeah, but you're on the board, so I assume you must have had a report back that.
Yeah, I can't, well, it's not that I don't care, I don't remember the details. I wouldn't be able to accurately say why
I
they
was just
decided
wondering
not to.
what the drawback.
I don't, so I wouldn't be able to say accurately why Essex decided not to.
An answer?
If you have an answer, that's great.
Well, I mean, the simple answer was they decided it was not in Essex's best interest to pursue this. They decided that there were too many unknowns and it wasn't worth for them to be involved in this at this time.
That could be. I'm again not familiar enough with the why. I just knew the result. And
So is there going to try to be some kind of a meeting for the public? You know, it's like pulling teeth.
there's been, I mean, I hate to say this, I mean, no Shelburne Select Board members have attended, but there have been many public informational meetings over the last year and a half.
On this?
When we gave, for example, when our consultant Delta Works gave a public presentation at South Burlington City Hall, I think elected officials from every other community were there. Where there have been a number of public informational meetings throughout the last year and a half.
So has there been any in the town? Just the town itself?
Except for the presentations that we've had, and we've had a number of them at the Shelburne Select Board meeting, there have not been anything else separate from that.
Okay.
Joe, I think that this is a huge communication fail, quite frankly. Next week, half the population's going out of town. The following week, it's on the ballot. And this is a really big decision, I think. And people are gonna look at this and not know what to do. This should have been presented ages ago.
Pros and cons.
In pros and cons, and not at a select board meeting, because people can't make it out at 7 o'clock at night and then wait till 9:30 after Gary's gone everything that he needs to say and chastise people. It should have been done at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon when people are more fresh. This sucks, quite frankly.
Is there any discussion of doing this type of presentation at town meeting?
I definitely plan on it, something a little more formal than just throwing up
That's
a
probably
bent up
gonna
piece
be
of
a
it.
bigger attendance.
So, I do think that there were, I'm not going to discount the criticism. I accept that. You got to remember, this town was focused on a lot of other stuff.
Too much of it.
And a lot of these, I don't want to sound anything else besides honest, but there were a lot of issues that over the last year, this, stormwater utility, and some others that I would have liked to see a lot more attention being paid, but we were really hung up on some other things, and I'm not discounting those.
Right.
And so a lot of these really important things did get talked over in a sense. I do think that there was probably more of an effort to get information out than maybe you're giving credit, but I wouldn't say it was as great as it could have been. It did get swallowed up by a lot of other things that were going on, and I feel like that was unfortunate.
But now it's on the ballot.
And sometimes things don't become real to people in a sense until, the ink has been signed. And I get it, I think that there were some efforts over this past year and a half to have people involved and invited to some of the public informational meetings. And again, I think in Shelburne, other things took priority in the last year, and
That's really unfortunate.
I
The
completely
library
agree.
had like a whole committee. They submitted a survey. It got on the ballot in November. This seems like it's been flying below the radar.
I think in Shelburne it probably has been. And Shelburne has, again, because over especially the last 7 or 8 months, we were tied up into other things, and the bandwidth was probably not there to put as much focus on something like this, which is a huge deal, not just for the way it impacts our public safety, not just as Shelburne residents, but people, if you're going somewhere else in Chittenden County, it's a very important issue. I can't agree more. It got swallowed up by other things, and it's a shame because this is really a matter of life and death, one way or the other. I'm not advocating for regional dispatching, but emergency dispatching and 911 call taking is life and death stuff for our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, and for the public. This is serious stuff, much more so, and I don't mean to sound flippant, than some of the other things that maybe we were focused on or overly focused on in Shelburne. This is life and death stuff. It's a big deal.
I'll just comment to that, Joe. Some of the presentations were well done, and there were people in attendance. This room was full at times, but they all focused on the positives in this project, and we never really got to hear what the downsides could be until just very recently.
Well, I don't think that, when we talk about regional dispatching, Shelburne already does regional dispatching through a contract model. So we know that regional dispatching works because we do it here and we do it well. What this is doing regional dispatching through shared governance, not a contracting model. That's the difference, right? And bringing the 911 center in Chittenden County all under one roof. There are pros, there are cons, and again, I think that at this stage, again, I guess this is my personal opinion and professional opinion, having a seat at the table is still in Shelburne's best interest to work out these pros and cons and to make the best decision possible for Shelburne 12 months or 24 months from now. Thank you.